Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Eckhart and welcome to Calling All Men, a show destigmatizing men's mental health. Today we're discussing dismantling the like, how social media and the media affect a man's mental health. Joined with me again is Jeff Matsushita. Jeff, thanks for being here again.
I appreciate the time and the conversation, Ryan.
I heard a quote the other day. I'll read it to you. It says, Teddy Roosevelt once said, "Comparison is a thief of joy." And I think that's a very hefty quote when you think about social media and the media. So,
Theft of joy, gosh, that's a word that is not really in my vocabulary this past year. And so, in connection with social media, that has been part of the reason why I don't really spend a lot of time on Facebook, particularly. I use Twitter as a news source, but that's really the extent of my social experience. My feelings, though, I noticed that when I was on Facebook, it was great to see people in their pictures, and that's what I was really craving in the storylines. But I also started feeling worse about myself, questioning, was I a good enough father? Because we haven't taken our kids to Disneyland yet. We haven't taken them out hiking and camping, into Yosemite or wherever else it would be. Boy, I didn't really say I love you to the world, and so thankful about my wife and how lucky I am as a husband on our anniversary. And I was really not wanting to invest the time into people's birthday wishes. It didn't feel genuine to me. So I do feel fortunate being at 43, not as tied to that social piece of connection. But during COVID and the quarantine, I found that I was using it as not only a news source, but also as a lifeline. But also recognizing that I felt worse about myself. And so for me, making the choice not to utilize Facebook in a way that would be, I don't know, of expressing our storylines or whatnot. And there was a quote I'd heard about that of it's the filtered life. And my friend's wife had written a book, and that was An Unfiltered Life was the name of the title of her book. But she talked about her struggle with alcohol. But on the surface, she always looked polished, kind, physically beautiful. But the struggles behind that filter were really what she revealed in her book. And so I just have a lot of empathy and appreciation for folks who are willing to have this conversation about the filtered life and talk about social media.
Mm-hmm. How has social media affected masculinity in men?
I think there's been benefits, there have been harms. From the harm end of it, I do think it has still limited the expressions that we see in masculinity, kind of that muscular culture of what are my gains at the gym? What are my supplements that I'm taking? What kind of things am I crushing? I think that's a very tired narrative of limiting manhood to be just around our physical body or how hypersexual we are. On the other side, I have, in comparison though, there have been some beautiful things shared with me around vulnerability. Men who have shared during the pandemic and beyond, before, of their feelings of insecurities, of loneliness. It's a way to connect. I've connected with groups of men out of New York that I never would be able to, but we share writings. They'll record things in brief moments. So again, I don't think it's all negative. Unfortunately, we don't do it. Maybe I haven't been good enough at producing content that is more honest and vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I just recently took part in a Call to Men's I Love You challenge. And I find myself all day yesterday and all last night, when I'd keep looking at my phone excessively, and I'd see that Twitter emblem on the top, and I'd come down how many likes did it get? And I had this deep feeling of insecurities. The purpose was to express love and model vulnerability, yet I was not feeling secure. I was feeling really worried about what other people would think of me. So it took me an act of really just leaving my phone in the bedroom on the charger and spending a couple hours out, not having it in my vicinity. Mm-hmm. But it was a strength of will and to be able to stay away from it from brief moments of time.
I know when I go home to California this week for spring break, I usually leave my phone upstairs on my bed, and I go downstairs and I don't go upstairs for all day, and I'm just not on my phone, and it's so relieving and so comforting. and like not having to check every 5 seconds, because that's usually what I do when I'm like here at school. Like I check my phone every 5 seconds, like, oh, did someone Snapchat me? Oh, did someone like my post on Instagram? And it just like, it's so comforting knowing that I don't have to be on my phone all the time when I'm at home, because I'm with family. So I want to spend time with my family. And also like I'm similar with you with Instagram. Like I'm always worried about who likes my posts, how many people like my posts, and I have to turn off like notifications, because I used to get notifications like, oh, so and so liked your post, and I'm just like very insecure about that. And like, did I say something wrong? Is this picture not good enough for this person? I try and like compare to other people, and that's just it's a thief of my joy.
I really appreciate you connecting it to that quote. There's a thought I had, like I assumed it would be making us more connected, and I assumed I'd be more connected to people, but what I found is that it's like you shared, the comparison really kicks in. So I'm not leaving space to feel connected. I am in a very insecure place. Also, at our home, we've talked about leaving our phones when we have dinner together, leaving them away from the space, and I always found I felt very less important to people who would have their phone out. And so if it was just you and I and your phone were on this coffee table, I would feel less than. I know that may not be your intention, but the impact on me would be that I don't matter as much as whoever is willing to text you or communicate with you. And then witnessing people actually interrupt our conversations and respond either via text or phone call just made me feel less than. So again, if I want to see it, I need to be it. So that's been one of my practices.
It's about like being present in the moment. I saw a video last week. It was Simon Sinek, and he had talked about how at a meeting, people always put their phone on the table, and then they put it upside down, and like they always like look at it, and if it buzzes, they look at it. And it's like not being present in that moment and not being with the people that you're with right now. Like me and you right now. Like if I had my phone right there, it wouldn't be the same as like just us talking like we are now. So
the thief of connection. I think to bring in that quote, it doesn't allow that. So I grew up in rural Montana, so for us, bus trips for athletics were always a part of the get. And then I moved here, and my wife coached at high school, as did I, and they would, on the girls' basketball side, they would take one bus trip out to Caldwell, and Julie shared she noticed that the bus was silent. There wasn't a lot of talking, but there was a lot of blue screens. And so I think even for me, seeing that disconnect, even though you're physically close to one another, not taking those opportunities to build connection, deepen relationships that a bus trip or car ride or even sitting across a coffee table could allow. If we were allowing other people from outside the physical space to be taking away our presence, or thieves of that opportunity to be present, I think that's a detriment to all of us.
Yeah, I know when I go out to dinner with some of my friends, everyone puts their phone on the table. And it's just like, I mean, I do it too. So like, I'm to blame as well, but like, it's just crazy. Like we're with these people around us, yet we're still talking to other people that are not there, like face to face with us.
The immediacy, it's almost a duality of immediacy. Not only you physically in front of me, but also the virtual immediacy, whoever's in my pocket will come out or on the table. I kind of feel good about myself when I put my phone face down, thinking I'm being a much more connected person. But in reality, I'm still waiting for that connection outside of the physical space I'm in.
Yeah. Shifting the topic a little bit, how has pop culture affected masculinity in men?
Well, I can speak to my experiences. Again, different generation that we're in, but for me coming up, the bodies I saw, and Jackson Katz in his first film, Tough Guys, really illustrated through media or movie culture of this expansion of the male body. And he starts, in the 60s, but really ending up with this transition between Rambo, whose body is a feature, muscles, and that worth of physical size, and a lot of violent opportunities to kill people, weapons, right? Multiple bullets in the gun, to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then beyond, I think the WWE world has brought us these men in these muscular bodies that are only possible through some form of supplement or drug enhancement. But if that becomes our reality, if that's what I see as manhood, as somebody with 22-inch biceps, then anything that I'm in my genetic limitation of what I'm able to do is going to be seen as a failure. And my fear for a lot of us as men is that if we continue to see ourselves as failures, we're not going to be authentic, we're not going to have that joy. And that, I believe, leads to self-harm, either harm through alcohol, drugs, to numb some of those feelings of insecurities, or violence to our partners or children, that if we don't match up enough to those expectations through pop culture's representation, that we may take our anger and frustrations out on those we love.
Mm-hmm. And I know when I grew up, I always saw like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He was the one. He was like my Arnold Schwarzenegger. So he was in these big action movies, violence. He's a huge dude. So like I looked up to him. Was like, wow, I want to be just like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson when I grew up. But as I grew older, I was just like, I can't live up to that standard, and it kind of like set me back a little bit, because like Hollywood places like a film on things saying like, oh, this is how men are supposed to look, how they're supposed to act, and if you're anything other than that, like you're just like not like a man.
I do think that pop culture can be entertaining and valuable, but it's also what we're willing to consume. So sometimes behind the filter, through work with the Call to Men, I've had the opportunity to be in conversation with professional sports teams, because this is where we, as a platform, the NFL specifically has been a wonderful platform of shifting this narrative around real men wear pink and other expressions of manhood and colors to be allowed in, but also using that platform to talk about ending domestic and sexual violence. I was with a team a couple years ago, and I was struck, one, that I'm older than NFL head coaches. That was a weird shakeup to me. But also, before we did our presentation, the head coach was talking about love. And not just talking about it, but he was asking for it, saying our job is to love one another. We can move at the speed of trust. If you love the guy next to you, you're willing to go to war with him, and we can succeed more through love. And unfortunately, I don't hear that in a lot of ways. That behind the scenes look, though, was very vulnerable. And I do believe in the sports culture particularly, we're shifting this narrative of what it means to be a man. And I'm waiting for pop culture to maybe catch up with more expressions of what it means to be a human. My gender identities, seeing more folks from historically marginalized communities, represented in film and in print and in books. The more we see different forms of expressions of manhood, then the more healing and the more humane we can all be. If we can see it, we can be it.
I know growing up, it was always like a white male as like the lead, and then like all like white cast, white like producers, director, and everything. But like now, as we shift more into like 2021, like you see more like diverse. Like you see women as the leads, like in Star Wars, like the sequels, like there's a woman at the lead, and then you see other like movies that are more like racially like aware of like what's going on, and like you see more diverse in like the films and TV shows.
Yeah, I think it's shifting that narrative. That folks on the margins of the margins have always existed with different identities that are not, heterosexual white male or white female heterosexual. So yeah, I think part of social media as well has allowed folks to have a voice. And I think that they have put pressure and also shared what they want to see and how they want to be represented with the different identities that we all carry. They've asked for that to be on the screen. And so I do think that is also a benefit of giving a voice to individuals and ways of expressing to see folks who may look like you or represented in ways that are empowering versus the belittling piece.
How do you see Hollywood changing how they present men?
I've been more drawn to characters that are more holistic. I get really interested in well-rounded pieces, and not to say, well, just to be on the physical abilities, right? So male leads who are not only displaying emotions such as fear or tears, expressing that, but also who are willing to ask for help. I think part of that hero's journey, you mentioned Star Wars, that hero's arc, that there is always a place where the hero is in need of support from somewhere else, and they get it. I do think that we've taken a deeper dive in the media that I've been able to consume, from Hollywood, quote unquote, that is really spending more time in that low end where they're getting help. Again, not as a sign of weakness, but how that help supports, and we all lift up. I think that support is necessary, and support is always part of that hero's journey. So I do appreciate that they're actually spending more time into telling more of that story of what it looks like to get help.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies is Treasure Planet, and I don't know if you've seen it. Anyways, the main character, he's like this tough guy. He goes to jail, and he's like in with the cops and stuff, and it's like a sci-fi movie. Throughout the whole movie, he becomes more like emotional and like more like aware of like what's going on, and like he's like in the one part he starts crying, and it's just like it's so like real, and it's just like wow, like you see this tough guy, and then like he goes from like the hero's journey he talked about, and it's just crazy to think about. And then he had like John Silver, who was like his like mentor and like the guy he looked up to and he wanted to be like, and it was just it's just one of my favorite movies, and it's really real seeing like men cry like in movies, especially animated movies.
I make that connection from the screen to real life. I do remember the first time I saw my father cry, and it stuck with me. But I think that's as far as us as folks who identify as male, knowing that it is part of the natural feelings that we have and being able to express those emotions. So again, taking the permission that we see on a screen to put it into our own real lives, there's healthiness. One of our teachers talks about tears. Like they're just water trying to find their way back to the ocean. If you got snot, take care of the snot, but let them tears run into the ocean. So I think the more opportunities we get repetitions of seeing people in male bodies displaying those emotions, such as sadness and tears, I think the better we are as humans.
What role does social media play in someone's mental health?
I can speak to it, how it affects me and its role in my life. I have sought community through my Twitter feeds. It's allowed me some agency to be able to follow in certain individuals, and I do think that's an upside. Coming in from the world where it was just network TV were the only forms of media, and now with social, getting stories while they're happening, but also from a narrator and a lens that I would never experience. One of the recommendations we often talk with men is to read authors who have different identities than us. So a lot of Black queer writers have helped me broaden out the experience through their lens, what they've shared, not only in print, but also on Twitter, to capture images, to see through their eyes what joy is, to see what sadness is, and everything in between those two emotions. So it has allowed me into a way to see others' experiences that I never would before. So there's a way I think it's a highlight, and it's actually made me a broader person who's more aware. And also stepping away from my own racism that I came up with, assuming, as Notorious B.I.G. put it, you either got a wicked jump shot or you sell crack rock. So for me, seeing Black men only in those two very narrow binaries was certainly unhealthy. And so again, Twitter has allowed me to see expressions of Black joy, of Black pain, of Black normalcy, and whatever that means, that I've seen other expressions through that lens that's helped me become more human.
I definitely feel that Twitter helps you like broaden your understanding of like what's going on. And also like on Instagram, like I feel like there's always seems to be like a filter on certain posts, like what people say, and like that's only like one moment, and they show that they're like happy, and sometimes people aren't like happy and they're struggling, and it's like you only see what they want you to see.
I think that cheats us again, goes back to being in person, right? I get that full range from you. I get the context, but sometimes with those pictures, I don't get the full context. I just get what's intended for me to be witnessed. So that wholeness comes back to the well-rounded piece we talked about with media. I think is super valuable for us to normalize that we all have expressions that are going to vary, our highs, our lows, and everything in between.
And I always compared myself to other people as well. And again, it was the thief of my joy, and it kind of made me wonder if I was worthy enough, if I was enough, and then I watch these videos and I'm just yeah, it's not most of the time it's just fake on Instagram. Some people only show you what they want you to see, and there's so much more going on behind the scenes that you don't see.
I agree with that 100%.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you again, Jeff, for being here, and we'll see you next time on Calling All Men.